Business development podcast leaders, Hypervac Technologies has long been a sponsor of the show, but they are now breaking new ground with Hyperfab, a division set to revolutionize metal fabrication. Rooted in family-run service, Hypervac now introduces fiber laser cutting machines, reshaping the game in metal fabrication. Hyperfab's fiber laser cutters offer precision beyond compare, meeting modern standards flawlessly. Speed up your projects with remarkable efficiency, reducing production time and boosting productivity. Versatility is key, handling diverse materials and thickness for endless possibilities. In the competitive landscape, cost-effectiveness is paramount. Hyperfab's fiber laser cutters optimize resources, minimizing waste and energy consumption for sustainable, cost-efficient process. Safety takes the spotlight too, with advanced features ensuring a secure work environment. As leaders in duct cleaning equipment, Hypervac Technologies extends its commitment to excellence. Explore Hyperfab's cutting-edge technology at www.hypervac.com/hyperfab. Elevate your metal fabrication with precision and innovation from Hyperfab. Thanks for listening to a word from our sponsor. Let's get back to the show. Welcome to episode 136 of the Business Development Podcast. And today we're chatting all about value proposition with Joel Magalnick. Stick with us. You're not going to want to miss this.
The great Mark Cuban once said, business happens over years and years. Value is measured in the total upside of a business relationship, not by how much you squeezed out in any one deal. And we couldn't agree more. This is the Business Development Podcast, based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and broadcasting to the world. You'll get expert business development advice, tips and experiences, and you'll hear interviews with business owners, CEOs, and business development reps. You'll get actionable advice on how to grow business. Brought to you by Capital Business Development, capitalbd.ca. Let's do it. Welcome to the Business Development Podcast. And now your expert host, Kelly Kennedy.
Hello, welcome to episode 136 of the Business Development Podcast. And today we have an absolutely amazing returning guest. We are thrilled to bring back Joel Magalnick, a seasoned professional with a dynamic career spanning technology, journalism, marketing, entrepreneurship, and academia. With roots as a developer during the early stages of the internet, Joel's journey has been marked by a relentless pursuit of innovation and adaptation. Transitioning seamlessly into journalism, he spent over a decade at the helm of a community newspaper, where he honed his storytelling prowess and deepened his understanding of local communities. Joel's entrepreneurial spirit led him to found several app-based startups, where he played pivotal roles in their inception and growth. Alongside his entrepreneurial ventures, Joel has also shared his expertise as an instructor at esteemed institutions such as Wenatchee Valley College and MacEwan University, where he has shaped the minds of future professionals in digital communication and user experience design. Leveraging his diverse skill set and experiences, Joel launched North Then West, a consulting practice dedicated to helping companies define and refine their value propositions. With a keen eye for market positioning and a knack for strategic thinking, Joel empowers organizations to refocus their strategies and emerge as leaders in their respective industries. With a finger on the pulse of digital innovation, Joel's launched startups, shaped young minds at universities, and now as the founder of North Then West, he's guiding companies to redefine their value propositions and lead in today's ever-evolving market. Joel, it's an honor to have you back on the show.
Thanks so much for having me back. I'm really psyched to be here. This is great.
I am really psyched to have you. And we talked about this, at the beginning of the episode. Just by some crazy, weird coincidence, your very first episode with us was episode 36. Discovering your company's true value proposition. That was 100 episodes ago from today.
Yes. And man, what 100 episodes it's been, huh?
It's been a ride, for sure. We couldn't be more grateful.
That's great. Yeah. And even, we're thinking about a year since we did our last recording as well. And, evolution has occurred
Yeah.
for sure, as well as it should for any business out there.
Totally. And, me and you have had plenty of conversations outside of this show too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we both live in Edmonton. We've met before. We haven't gone to lunch enough. But in all fairness, that is not your fault. That is my fault. I've been so bloody busy.
Oh,
But we need to change that ASAP.
let's do it. I'm in.
But value proposition is something that is so near and dear to me. In business development, value proposition is a gigantic part of the job. It's required absolutely everywhere. And yet it's something that gets so little time, so little discussion in many, many boardrooms. And yet it should be a prime discussion in all boardrooms.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I think what we should do is start by defining what value proposition is, just in case there's anybody out there who's not really sure, or maybe has heard the term and just kind of nodded and smiled, like, yeah, okay, well, we'll do that for sure. So to me, the way that I define it is it's almost like a Venn diagram of thinking about what are the needs of a customer, how do your products or services that you offer meet those needs? And then third, how do the people that you have on your team work with your customers to make sure that they understand and get the most out of those products? And so it really is pulling together those customer expectations and offerings that you have as a leader.
Yeah. Why do you think it is such a hard discussion to have as a company?
I think it can be any number of reasons, and it depends on the type of company that you're talking about as well. So, if you're an established company, you've been around for a long time, you've had growth, a lot of that growth has been organic. So, you started out as one thing, and old school companies maybe started out like, hey, there's a need for us to, manufacture and sell socks of all things, let's say. And as time went on, there was a realization like, socks are good, but t-shirts are also good, and everyone wants to wear t-shirts, so we're going to do that. And there wasn't a whole lot of intention in that planning as the company went from socks to t-shirts to underwear to pants to whatever it is. And as there was some sort of opportunity, companies jumped after it, and it was fine. And they made money and they had decent profits, and that was all they needed to do. But as we've started to see in the past, I want to say past 20 years, since the internet really started to take off, that we have a lot of companies that are coming from overseas that can make a product of similar or greater quality for much cheaper. And so that's one thing that occurs. It could be that there are other people in your community or in your particular space that have created some sort of innovations in that space that make it more difficult for you as a leader to be able to compete because your customers are seeing something a little bit shinier or a little more interesting or getting their needs better met. And so because there hasn't been that level of intentionality over time, the need to really step back and think about these are the things that we offer, and this is why. That word why is going to be hugely important, and I think we're going to be hitting that word quite a bit throughout this conversation. Is why do we exist? Why do we make these products? And why is it important for the products that we make why is it so important for those to satisfy our customers? And then asking those questions, who are our customers and who should our customers be? Because if you're saying everybody, even if you're Amazon, if you're saying everybody, that you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because there are people who actually don't need Amazon. They need something a lot more niche or something that that Amazon doesn't sell. If you're a much smaller business, then very much so you need to think about who those customers are and how you meet their needs and figure out where they are so you can serve them.
Yeah. Yeah. Either way, I think the important takeaway, and I want everybody to walk away from this episode sitting down and having a conversation about value proposition. I hope that is the takeaway
Absolutely.
from every single person who listens to this episode. Mm-hmm. If it's been 6 months, if it's been 2 months, if it's been a year, God knows longer, it is time to sit down again and reevaluate your company's value proposition, figure out what you're doing great and what you could be improving upon.
Yeah. The thing I didn't mention is newer companies. And this is where they can really come in with much more intentionality from the very beginning and say, hey, we see a pain point. There's a problem that needs to be solved. We're going to solve that. But really digging in and figuring out as we solve this problem, these are who our customers need to be. There could be a whole group over here that we don't serve, and that's okay. And, maybe at some point you will get there. But start small, build really well, and then expand out.
Totally. And Joel, I would say too, you have the most passion for value proposition out of anybody that I have ever met. I know when we had our first kind of meeting and conversation and our very first interview together, I remember leaving that thinking, my gosh, he is on to something. How I couldn't believe it because I've never seen a company that's focused on value proposition strictly before. North and West is so unique in that, but I think it's unique because you're unique and you truly have a passion for value proposition and helping companies succeed. And it literally just reverberates off of you. And I love that about you. But one of the things that I really wanted to chat about, and I know we have a lot of new listeners, the reality is 100 episodes ago, long time ago. How did you end up developing this passion for value proposition?
I would say that it's something that has been at the edge of my consciousness for years and years. And so, as you mentioned, I ran a small media company, small newspaper for a very long time. I've done a lot of work in the user experience space. So user experience design being you've got a website, you've got an app, and you're trying to figure out how do I make this work best for my users so I can run them through a journey, so I can, fulfill this call to action of making a purchase or buying tickets or doing, signing up for a newsletter, whatever that is, of making those be the most seamless and smooth experiences possible. And so pulling those things together, doing a lot of work in marketing and content marketing as well, kind of gave me this realization that differentiation for nearly any business is hugely important. And so the natural progression from just differentiating yourselves to actually understanding the intentionality of why we're differentiating ourselves and establishing the importance of the products that we're services that we're offering, that's really what kind of brought me into this idea of okay, we know that this is what value proposition is. I haven't really seen anybody else focus on value proposition specifically. It's usually either something that gets tossed in as part of a larger package or doesn't get discussed at all. And so, I saw my opportunity and I took it.
Yeah. And talk about North then West. What is it that you actually do at North then West?
So there's a few things. So there's two primary services that we offer. And the first one actually being designing value proposition. And so speaking with my clients and really getting a sense of who they are as an organization, see where they might need help with managing change or making change to begin with, and looking at how their customers view them and looking at how their employees view them, and then how they, we mix those two parts together. And then, even if necessary, looking at the products to make sure that the products that they have they're being offered properly or, actually have a real place in the market. And then, getting into some of that marketing as well and some of that positioning, segmenting, and really establishing who those customers are. And then the other part of this, once we feel like we have a reasonably good level of value proposition that we can bring out to the world, is another service that I would say I offer it less, or I implemented it less than the value proposition itself. It's called category design. A lot of times we think about it as niching or finding a niche. And that's the idea that any company that feels like it wants to be differentiated from the rest of their marketplace figures out their own category. And as they figured out their own category, they are able to jump ahead of their competition and let everybody else chase them.
Nice. Nice. One of the things that you had kind of stopped on there was how the employees view the company. Interesting. Elaborate on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So any company, doesn't matter how big you are, you're going to run into people who think that you have one mission when in fact, maybe that was the mission 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Companies moved on, but nobody really communicated that to them. Or sometimes people are just resistant to change and don't get that, like, oh, actually, we're kind of, we're evolving, but, some of these employees are staying behind. And so the communications aspect and the morale aspect and the autonomy aspect is something to me that's really important. And the clients that I take, I want this to be important to them. It's part of the reason that I'll say yes, is that they are thinking about, how do we meet the needs of our employees? Because happy employees make for better morale, and customers can see that.
Totally. Totally. I never thought about it from that standpoint that like technically you would think that like, at least to me, I feel like I would make that assumption. It's a dumb assumption.
Mhm.
But I'd be like, oh yeah, the employees know what we do here. But like what you're saying is they might not.
Not always. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Or sometimes the employees know exactly what they do and the management doesn't.
I've seen that. My gosh. Yeah. It's just so important. It's so overwhelmingly important. And yet it just gets swept under the rug or it gets part of a sales discussion. But value proposition is not a sales discussion. It's a full company discussion.
Yes. And that is actually one of the things that I really haven't seen anywhere, is that a lot of times when people are talking about value proposition, they're talking about the specific product or service. And I wanted it to be much more holistic than that.
Yeah, yeah. And so you really do. You take a full company stance on this. You look at every aspect and then say, here's what the value proposition really is, or here's what we think it is. Do you ever look at a company and then are like, I think your value proposition is something completely different than you do?
I've had a couple of instances where that has been the case. And when I have conversations with my clients, some of them are easy, some of them were all smiles and happy, and some of them are challenging, difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those are the ones that are the most meaningful, because you're giving people a moment to sit back and hopefully reflect.
Yeah.
And say, okay, wow, maybe this is where change needs to happen.
Like me and you have actually spoken with a mutual company, and I spoke with them first, and it was a really interesting conversation because when I was done, I was like, you know what, 100%, I can help this company, but you know what? We need more time on the value proposition. And then I actually referred them to you, and I think they ended up becoming a client of yours.
Yeah, and we are, I would say, very close. By the time our listeners are hearing this, they will be very close to completing that first, the first iteration of their value proposition implementation.
Amazing. Yeah, it's one of those things that business development, we're great at helping with value proposition. We're great at helping to identify, but even business development sometimes needs a little helping hand. And in my case, that's where Joel came in, right? And the reality is that it's very hard to sell or to market a product effectively if you have not done a great job at identifying the true value of that product or service. If you're not able to show something tangible, right? And I think sometimes it gets left in the mix, right? Value is so critical. It's so critical to business development, but it's not always obvious.
Yes, this is true. And then the other part of that too is that we can come up with I'm going to call it a quote unquote final value proposition for a client. And a year later, based upon growth, based upon, market conditions, anything like that value proposition will change. And I'm not saying, oh, you got to hire me back and do this, but I am saying you need to revisit your value proposition at minimum every year.
Yeah. And would you say that any time that there's a major change in an organization, they should also do that exercise?
Yeah. I would. And it really depends upon what a major change looks like. If we're talking about, a brand new product that is meant to be their flagship product, for sure. Absolutely. If you're talking about a huge scale up and growth on employees or number of customers, then absolutely, because a lot of those customers may have a disconnect with what your current offerings are. And if there's a major change, not to your company, not to your products, not to your staff size, but to the market itself, to those items outside of your control, then it's also very important to revisit that value proposition, because it could be that your market is moving on and you're staying still.
Yeah. What about like the change out of key employees? I could see that, being a tough one too.
Yeah. And I would say that is something. I don't know that that's as important to be looking at value proposition, unless when we're talking about a key employee, there's somebody who is leading your product or leading your customer experience or leading, your HR, that sort of thing, because they may come in with a philosophy that's new and different. And this is where change management needs to occur, because this is where the employees need to be brought on board and be put on the same page as this new mission.
Yeah. We're asking a lot of companies right now, Joel, to reevaluate their value propositions, or maybe to have the discussion for the first time. But I think we're also kind of saying, hey, go do this thing that you haven't known how to do. Can you maybe give us a 101?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. And I'm gonna do this in sort of a general way, a little bit abstract. Yeah, so this is one of the things that we talk about. And so it's called the design thinking process. And so basically you can look at it in 5 or 6 steps. And the first step being empathize. And so when we're thinking about our value proposition, we need to put ourselves into the shoes of our customers and into the shoes of our team. And so, like, if I'm talking about management, putting myself into the shoes of the rest of my team and really understanding what are the problems that they have and what are the problems that they're trying to solve. From there, once we have a little bit of an understanding, then we define what those problems are and how we need to focus on fixing them. So it really is, it's not about coming up with new stuff yet. It's really about understanding what is our situation, what is our moment in time, what is, it's our benchmarks, it's our baseline. From there, design thinking methodology calls it ideate. A lot of people call it brainstorming. They are really interchangeable. And this is where we actually really start ideating on what are solutions to solve these problems, or to really get a sense of what it is, who we are in the market, where we sit, and how we meet the needs of who our customers are. I do want to say in that define phase as well, just taking one step back, is that we do need to define who our target customer is, if it is different from who we expect that to be. So up to this point, we have empathized, we've done that definition, we've done our brainstorming, we've got a lot of ideas. Now we need to pull all of those things together, start prototyping it. And this can be prototyping on paper, it can be prototyping on, writing out what that definition of that value proposition is. It can be, kind of the start of redesigning that product. And then we test it out. We talk with our customers, we talk with our employees, we talk with potential customers, we talk with other types of stakeholders, and we figure out, are these things that we're designing, is this value proposition, this statement that we've come up with, does it resonate? Does it hit the nail on the head? And if it does, great, awesome, 2 thumbs up. If it doesn't, and that's going to be the case more likely than not, then we iterate and we go back and we do more design, we do more testing, prototyping, testing, until we feel like we're at a place where we got it right.
It really is a work backwards from the problem process.
Yes, yes.
You are essentially creating your value proposition to fit a challenge that your customer has, not the other way around, not building a product looking for a challenge. You're working backwards from a challenge to build a product that will then meet that challenges.
Mm-hmm. And, I'll talk to people and I tell them what I do. And they're like, I know so many companies that need that because they've got this thing that they've created and they don't know who it's for.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually talking to a lot of mentors, which I've done on this, this channel at this point, right? Like talked with tons and tons of people across the whole Alberta ecosystem and then some. And they said that that's one of the biggest problems that most founders have is that they have this brilliant idea and they make this product, but then that product doesn't have a need, or the need that it fills, there's already something there that does it better, or it's not cost effective, so it doesn't work. It's an interesting thing. I wonder how often that is the case, that someone comes out and they're like, yep, I have this product and I'm just going to sell it to the world without seeing if the world even needs it.
I don't want to throw a number out there, but I'm going to say it's high.
Yeah. When you're going into companies and seeing this quite regularly, I'm sure, what is your advice to them? Like at that point forward, is everything about you guys need to figure out what problem needs to be solved ahead of this, but out of everything that you guys do from that point forward, is that your recommendation?
I think it depends where we are in the phase and in the life cycle of the company and the products that they're offering. And so if they're already, 2 feet in and all the way in the deep end, they've got so much invested that to say, okay, drop everything and start over, it isn't realistic, even if sometimes it might be necessary. And so it ends up being much more about course correction. And yeah, I would leave it there. It's really about course correction.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your recommendations? Like, obviously, part of your process is very much client-focused process, trying to truly understand the client. In your experience, do you find that there is a pretty big mismatch between what the client needed and what the company you're working with was trying to offer them?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Sometimes the company that I'm working with really has a pretty good idea of what their value proposition is, and they just haven't been able to put it into words, or they haven't been able to cross that bridge of knowing what it is to communicating that to their employees and team, who then in turn communicate that to their customers.
It's like a bad game of telephone.
Sometimes that's what it is. If the company is big enough, there are enough layers there that somebody's got an idea. It's a great idea. And, people at that level are like, okay, we're all in, we're doing this. And then nothing happens.
Yeah.
Or they come up with messaging and they come up with plans that don't actually take into account what their customers need, or what their, the people that they work with need to actually share that messaging across. And a lot of that too. And this mutual client that we're talking about earlier, a lot of times the relationships that the people at the ground level, the ones who are with the customers, those relationships go very deep oftentimes. And, they know each other by name. Sometimes they're helping each other out outside of the workplace even. And so it's the relationship part of this of the customer, and I'm going to use the word relationship twice, but it's that relationship aspect of customer company that happens at that person to person level, and any amount of advertising or billboards or that sort of thing doesn't even come close. And so to be able to scale out those relationships and show that, hey, these people, basically it's almost like getting testimonials of like, this person at this company, when I was in my moment of greatest need, they pulled through for me.
Yeah.
And to be able to tell a story like that shows like, and they pulled through for me in this situation of this product that they offer, just goes to show like, yes, this is a company that thinks about who their customers are and what their needs are.
Yeah. I know like there's a lot of companies out there that if you say to value proposition or to improve their value proposition, what they're kind of thinking about is, how can we smoke and mirrors this to make this seem better versus truly creating a better value. What is your opinion on that? Is value proposition just about making something sound nice? Or is it truly about making something a better value or more valuable to the customer? I think people can look at that two different ways.
Yeah, and I have an I have an opinion on it, and I'm going to share that opinion, which is that it really is more than ticking off a box. Sometimes I'll talk to a client and they'll be like, we need this for compliance, we need this for something like that, and it's kind of begrudging, but I'll do that for you, but I don't always feel good about it because ultimately you're going to say that you do these things and you're not going to actually do them.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like, if you say that you're something, you say that this is what you do for your customers. This is how you treat the people within your organization. You're going to do it, then do it.
It's about real value. It's so I hope that we're
Mhm.
knocking that perception thing off the ledge here. If you are truly thinking about improving your value proposition, truly improve your value proposition. Do not just smoke
Yeah,
and mirrors or change the wording to make it sound better. Truly make your business or product or service better.
yeah, and part of that too. And I'm not saying that every company needs to be focused on diversity, inclusion, and equity and that sort of thing. Although it would be nice, but just respect who your customers are, make your products and your services fit those needs, and make sure that the people who are most closely interfacing with both of those know exactly what they're doing and get treated with the respect that they need and are given the tools that they need to actually implement.
Yeah. In business development, we put such a heavy emphasis on relationship. Relationship is something that's absolutely
Yeah.
so critical. Can you explain the relationship in value proposition?
The customer needs to understand what the product or service that you're offering does and who you are as a company. Sometimes those are one and the same, sometimes they're two separate things, and either one is okay. But it's really that at least in the companies that I talk to or want to be working with, it's having that understanding of, we're not selling a highly commoditized product all the time, that the products that we're selling do in some level need to be customized or individualized for our customers. And if they're going to be making a purchase, they need to see that we're going to be helping them, working with them, not just giving them something that they can use and here's the instruction manual and figure it out. That that part of the value proposition is making our products explainable enough or giving them the tools that they need to really be able to use and gain benefit and value from it.
Yes. Okay. Okay. I love what you just stopped on. So, defining what it is your product or service actually does. How many companies are doing this so vague that you can't even tell what it is they do?
See it every once in a while. It's yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, you'll look at marketing materials or ad materials, and you're like, oh yeah, this is what they do, and then you actually dig deeper, and you're like, yeah, that's not what they do at all.
I'm not even going to lie. I was guilty for this. I was guilty for
Uh,
this. When I started Capital, I knew business development, but I didn't know exactly what my service was going to be. And so in the beginning, I kind of just said, hey, we can do all this stuff to support you. And what's super funny is as we went forward, I learned more and more and more about what it is we actually do. And I think this happens at
mhm.
so many companies where they just start a company knowing they can do something great. They're not really sure what it is going to be. And over time, they really define what that value proposition is or what that service
Yeah,
really is. But yes, one of the things that we've really come to understand at Capital is you really do need to explain to people what each service does in detail so that they're aware of what it is they're buying and if it'll fit their need or not.
yeah. And before I started North and West, I just started that about a year and a half ago. I had a previous iteration of my consulting practice that focused a lot more on things like user experience and content marketing and that sort of thing. And it was really very challenging for me to explain what it is that I do until I actually took the time to sit down and establish what my value proposition is and really figure out, like, this is the category that I need to own. So doing category design for myself. And it's great that there are lots of people who understand UX. There's lots of people who understand content and writing and marketing and that sort of thing. But this is the lane that I want to be in. And, in that year and a half, I have evolved as well. And, my my value proposition now is focusing on the customer experience of for any company, and that needs to be part of your value proposition. And so that's the perspective that I take for value proposition, which has evolved over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I'll be honest, my evolution of understanding of business development, sales, marketing, the whole gamut changes every single year. Some years smaller than others, but every year there's a little more to it, a little better understanding. And I think I'm talking to my younger entrepreneurs out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
If right now you're like, shit, I don't have it all figured out, I want you to know that that's completely okay. I was there. Joel was there. It's a growing, learning experience. And it doesn't matter whether you're an expert or not. Sometimes it can take a little bit of time to truly identify our exact service and be able to define it and explain it in an easy to understand way that shows value. So I don't want them to feel alienated right now. Joel, me and you have both been there. We're both experts in our respective fields. And we've both run into problems in those areas of expertise, which is funny. But I think it happens to everybody.
I don't have all the answers yet. I am still learning as I go. And that's, if I have one piece of advice for anybody at any age, is always keep on learning. Always continue to try to understand what the work is that you're trying to do and how you best give that to the people that you're working with, whether that be coworkers, employees, customers. And ultimately, do what you need to do to succeed, but do so with intentionality. And just, always try to understand everything that you're doing.
This last year has been a total shakeup in just business in general, especially with the advent of AI.
Yeah.
How has AI affected value proposition?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I will say that AI has been with us for a long time, but it's just in, the past year and a half that it's really hit the mainstream. And most of that is about generative AI. So you plug a prompt into an AI system and it gives you information, it gives you images, it gives you videos. Some of those are really cool. Some of those are a little bit creepy or a little bit freaky.
Yeah.
But there are other ways that AI manifests itself as well. And so it can be used in predictive technologies. And so healthcare, I think, is a great example of this, where you can use AI medical technologies, machine learning. Data has been introduced to learning models, like vast amounts of data. And so these predictive models, for example, could look at an X-ray and using AI, figure out, compared to all these other millions of X-rays that it's looked at the same part of other people's bodies, see, that could be a tumor, that could be something else that needs to be looked at. And, even at the smallest, tiniest little, millimeter micrometer even size, recognize here's something that needs to be checked out and explored. And, that's not something that medicine has had before a decade ago.
Yeah, it is. It's going to change everything. I always like to think at the beginning of cell phones, let's just say back in the early 90s, we couldn't have known what they would become 20 or 30 years later. And I think that's where we're at with AI. I'm super impressed by what I've seen in the past year and a half. I wasn't following any AI until a year and a half ago. Like you said, it's I was the mainstream candidate.
Right. And so when we're, to answer your question, when we're thinking about how does that fit into value proposition, any company, two ways. First, any company needs to be thinking about how AI is going to supplant the things that they are doing today, because oftentimes AI might be doing things cheaper and better. And two is, how can AI be used to show that your value proposition as a company, as as a product or service, how can AI make those things that you offer better because you've got these vast amounts of data behind you, or you are using tools in a different way than anybody ever has before. And that is what your differentiator is. That's where you create that category for yourself based on that value proposition and pull yourself ahead of anybody else who might be in that space.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think on some levels, with AI being so new, it can really give a small company, what do you call it, like a power upgrade, or
Yeah, your power, like I'm just thinking of like Mario with his like
you can get a level up. It's
and it really can. But also like, don't be doing AI just for the sake of doing AI. Again, when I'm talking about value proposition, I'm talking about intention.
yeah.
And be intentional with it. Thousands and thousands of AI companies, mostly based on the generative AI, have popped up, and since the start of 2023, so a year and a half roughly, 80 to 90% of those companies will not be around 5 years from now.
Yes, I did see that statistic as well. That's huge. So it's like, how do you know even that you've got the right one, or that you've picked one that's gonna live? Like 15 to 20% are pretty low odds.
Yeah. And some of them are going to fizzle out.
Yeah.
Some of them might go out with a bang. Some of them, a good number of them, were started with the idea that, hey, we've got this idea and we hope to get acquired.
Yeah.
And that will happen with a number of them as well. And that's great for hopefully everybody. But also, like, we're seeing a huge explosion in creativity, and that's amazing.
We're seeing a huge explosion in creativity. I agree. We're also seeing a huge explosion of words that people would never say.
Yes, we are. And, there's a double-edged sword there. I don't purport to put myself forward as a huge proponent of AI, but I do see, like, I, kind of talking about, like, with this medical examples, for example, or looking at sensors, Internet of Things, physical hardware that integrate AI that can tell us information about the state of our world much more easily and quickly than ever before. And in an era of climate change, that is going to be hugely important. So still, it's a tool.
Yeah.
And so we need to use it wisely. Don't need to use it to fake things out or say bad things about people. And let's be nice about it.
Yeah. And I would say, like, in relation to if you are using AI to help you with your pitch or value propositions, remember, don't copy and paste these pitches, okay? Read them, make sure that they sound like you. What we always do is we actually handwrite our pitches first. Then we run them through generative AI and we just say, could you or would you improve this? And we look at the improvements it would make, and we may or may not add them to our pitch. We only add them if we deem that it adds value to the pitch itself. You still need to look at it as a person and come across as a person. And I think that that's what's really important about generative AI.
Yeah. The other thing that you can do there is ask the AI to compare it to other proposals or propositions that it's seen, and, show where yours is different.
That's a really great idea. I've literally never thought of that. Good job. That's why we bring you on here, Joel. You're really smart.
Yeah. You're prompt king, I guess.
Man, that's going to be a job one day. Prompt king.
Oh, it is. Maybe a different title. But, yeah, there are people who are doing that, and they're apparently doing very well.
I bet they are. It is, yeah, you only get what you ask for. So it's pretty important you're asking the right questions. Joel, one of the questions that I had regarding value proposition, are there companies that it doesn't matter for?
Yeah, and this is, I think you and I have talked about this in the past to some extent. And I think, personally, I would say that every company needs to have some level of value proposition. But ultimately, the ones where it's most important are the ones that are not those hugely commoditized companies. In marketing education that I've had, business education that I've had, the piece of advice that I've always seen is, or been told, is don't compete on price. That if you are trying to undercut everybody with the lowest price, of course, it's going to eat into your profits, even if you're at a huge high volume. But at the same time, there's always the possibility that some other company is going to come in and undercut you. And the same thing that you're doing to other companies is going to happen to you. And you got to figure out, what do you do then, especially if your costs end up being higher than than your revenue. So if you're that highly commoditized, it probably makes sense to have some sort of value proposition to do that little bit of differentiation. But ultimately, if you are less commoditized, if you are trying to provide something that's unique, if you are trying to differentiate yourself, then having that value proposition to be able to say, this is who we are and what we do. And we've got this product that's different, but we've also got this fabulous team. We've got this way to make it easier for you to implement whatever it is, or, complete that purchase. And that's going to give any company a leg up over anybody else.
Yeah. I think even companies that are competing on price, they're still obligated on some level to create a value proposition. And maybe that value proposition is we're the cheapest ones out there, but it's still a value proposition, right? Either way you look at
it. It is. Yeah. And, hopefully the products that they have are of value.
That's right.
And I'm speaking about quality, but, if you're selling something that's the cheapest and like if I'm just kind of thinking like retail or, steps in a supply chain, that you've got this, cheap product and it gets sold to your customers and, 3 out of 4 of them break within the first week, then nobody's going to buy from you again.
Yeah. It's so funny. We recently watched the BlackBerry movie. Have you seen that yet?
I haven't. I really liked it. I heard it was great.
It's so good. But in the end, it was quality that killed the company. They'd always created things, I believe, either in Canada or in North America. All of their products were manufactured in North America. They refused to outsource them to China. And I think it was like the one time they outsourced it to China, they all, like a whole bunch of them came back with problems. And it eventually sunk the company, which is absolutely bonkers. Oh. It's crazy. But you're right. Quality is very critical. And it typically doesn't come with the cheapest product. And so value proposition is important, if for that alone.
Yeah. Agreed.
One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, Joel, was what is the cost of not getting your value proposition right? Like, think about it. When we think of value proposition, at least in most service-based or product-based companies, we're typically thinking about it in the proposal stages, right? Mm-hmm. My gosh, what do you think the cost of lost proposals is because the value proposition was wrong?
Yeah. And this is where, when I mentioned that I evolved my own value proposition to be really thinking about the customer experience, this is really where I'm thinking in terms of how any company could be leaving money on the table by not thinking about their customer experience, by not thinking about how everything that they do is focused on their customers. And if, kind of like we talked about a few minutes ago with, having a solution without a problem, really understanding what that problem is to be solved is going to be really helpful for making a product that is going to sell and that your customers actually want. If you don't know the answer to that question, you've got a whole lot of supply and no demand. Mm-hmm. And you want the opposite, or you really want a balance between the two. And so establishing that value proposition really brings you to that point of equilibrium.
Walk us through, you've seen a lot of winning proposals and a lot of losing proposals, right? And I think that's one of the things that we're really thinking about. We're talking to a lot of entrepreneurs today, maybe solopreneurs, maybe they're selling services or products, and they're writing their own proposals. I've recently done a series on proposals when we revamped our proposals at Capital. And we revamped our proposals at Capital because we also recognized that we needed to improve the way that we demonstrated our value proposition. We knew what it was internally. We were doing a really shitty job of explaining it to customers. And one of the things that we came to after lots of hours of discussion and ideals was to really demonstrate to a customer how we either save them money or make them money. And we figure out what that dollar amount is. And we actually demonstrate it and say, this is the amount of money we intend to make you during this contract. And this is the ratio of that cost to our cost. And that's why it makes sense. Like the value proposition becomes very, very easy to understand when you can see how much money a company stands to make versus how much that service costs, right? But in your experience looking at other proposals, what are the ways that you would structure a proposal for success?
Yeah, and this is an interesting question. And I appreciate you talking about how you've kind of flipped the way that you do it in order to show, like, this is what we have to offer. Because there was a book that I read several years ago, and I don't remember the name of the author now, but it was called $1 Million Consulting. And what the author, he was a $1 million consultant, and he made short 2-page proposals. So short, sweet, simple. And it's actually a recipe that I've more or less followed as well. And depending upon what you're selling, it may have to be different. Sometimes you might have to have all the legal language and all that stuff in there. But the things that are really important to me in a proposal are being very clear about what you offer and the timeline upon which you're going to be providing what you offer. So those are kind of nuts and bolts parts of things. But then really kind of doing some storytelling, kind of like what you're saying. You're quantifying, this is how much you're not going to make if you don't use us. So what is the real benefit? So you have a product or service. It's a thing. It's a tool, basically, right?
Yeah.
Your tool that you are selling, whether it's business development services, in your case, Kelly, or it's a physical product, you are selling this because there is a problem to be solved. And so that problem to be solved is going to result in benefit to this potential client. So I'm just thinking of, one of the things that I offered to do recently, and I've got a proposal out for, is for a workshop on value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
And so the benefit is going to be that I've got an audience or a room full of people who we will actively do activities so they can help establish what their value proposition is for their specific companies.
Wow.
And so, explaining that benefit, and, we can talk about this in terms of something called a user statement. We don't have the screen share to be able to show this, but I am going to kind of talk through it. And so the way that I think about it is, and this is what I teach at my user experience classes as well, is as a user type. So it could be, we go real simple here. As an ATM user, I want to, and that will be the goal that we're trying to achieve. So as an ATM user, I want to withdraw money so that I can get a benefit. The benefit being so that I have cash in my pocket.
Yeah.
So again, as an ATM user, I want to withdraw money so I have my cash in my pocket. And that is a way that you can show for your customers, I am going to provide X so they can get this particular benefit. Be able to tell that story quickly and succinctly, I think, is probably going to be one of the most simple things that you can do. And then put that out in detail as well. So I usually have an overview where I would do something like that user statement, and then really list out the services that I'm going to offer to get them to that point. And then talk about what my responsibilities are as the consultant, what the client's responsibilities are as a client, that they need to, they've got stake in this game. They can't just be writing me checks. They gotta, they gotta act as well. They gotta participate as well.
Yeah.
And then what do we do jointly? What are our responsibilities together? Because I see this when I'm doing my work as creating a partnership. That's not going to be for everybody, but, based upon the work that they're doing. But for me, that's important. And then, when I'm costing it out, I think the method that you've been talking about, Kelly, and we've talked about this in our own conversations previously, of don't charge by the hour, charge by the value that you're providing.
Yes.
And so it's going to take time to figure out how you qualify that and quantify that. But probably in a case like this, the quality is going to get you to the quantity.
Yeah, that's right. Like, at the end of the day, I think most products or services are to help a client achieve a goal or dream that they have, right? Like, I think in that, and that's what they really want. They don't want your product or service they want what that product or service will do for them. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we're thinking about that along the way. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, Joel, is that in my mind, when I've looked at value proposition, and especially in my new understanding of value proposition, I've really tied it to dollar value. But are
Mhm.
there other values that maybe we're missing here?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And there's a few, I would say. And ultimately, a lot of it ends up tying back to that benefit of that user statement that I was just talking about a second ago, because there's value in customer satisfaction. There is value in being treated like a human, or being treated with some level of respect. There is the value of getting your tasks completed. If I'm there for a job to get done, if I'm trying to make my life easier, if you are making my life easier, that's a huge benefit. That's a huge value right there. And you can tie any of those things together, as all of those as qualities that you can draw a straight line to the money.
In your experience, how have you identified what is the most important value to, your clients' potential prospects?
I don't think I have one answer for that, actually. Every client has a different need. And again, if we're talking about commodity versus individual touch points, the customers that I'm working with are more about the individual touch points than the commodity.
Interesting. Yeah, it's such a broad topic. Like, honestly, I hope what people are starting to take away from this is that value proposition, there's a lot to it. And having somebody like Joel come in and work with your organization is worth every single penny. Mark my words, it is that critical. And I want you to think about it the next time you lose a proposal, what that cost really was to your company. And would it have not made sense to have brought in a consultant to potentially help you with that?
Yeah, agreed.
Joel, this has been absolutely awesome. I know we have a ton of people listening who are all in on value proposition. Can we talk just a little bit again about what challenges they might be having that reaching out to North and West should be their next step?
So if you're finding that you've got a solution without a problem, then you definitely need to be thinking about what your value proposition is. If you feel like you don't really know what your customers need or want, that's huge, because you do need to be thinking about what is the experience that you're providing your customer and what their needs are. If you feel like you have been in the market for a long time and you've not had a lot of change, and you're starting to see that the market is different or it's getting ahead of you, then this is a really good time to think about your value proposition and what it means, and what you can do to regain your position in the market. So that's where I would say are probably the three most important areas.
Amazing. And what are the best ways for them to get a hold of you, Joel?
Well, I've got a website. We all need our websites, right? norththenwest.com. There's two THs in a row there. So it's north, then, THEN, west.com. Or you can reach me by email, joel@norththenwest.com. Or you can also find North and West on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And I wanted, before we wrapped up today, because something has changed since the last time that we were on together, you have an awesome video series on LinkedIn. Can we talk about that for a second?
Oh, sure. You're just popping a surprise on me. I have to catch myself up with that. I know that you keep a lot of episodes in the can, and I'm kind of like one or two at a time when I'm doing this. So I got to keep myself up and running on it. But yeah, so I do every week. I do a roughly 1 minute little video that talks about different ways to think about value proposition, category design, and customer experience. Those are really the three areas that I'm talking about, and just either giving advice or making people think about how are they approaching their value proposition, their customer experience, and going in a direction where they are going to grow.
Yes, and they're awesome, and I've watched plenty of them.
Thank you.
And it's called Own Your Business. And where can they find it?
I have it on LinkedIn, And so if you follow North and West or you follow me, Joel Magalnick on LinkedIn, you will find them there. I do have a YouTube channel called, I think I have that as hashtag own your business. So you can find it there as well.
We're talking to a worldwide audience, Joel. What are your areas of service? Will you only service Canada?
Canada or US. I can service both of those areas easily. And otherwise, geographically, like within these two countries in North America, it doesn't really matter. We can do a lot of our work remotely. And if you need me to come out and help train your employees, do workshops, I am available to do that as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Joel, it's been great having you back, my friend. Thank you so much for doing this.
Good to see you, Kelly.
It's good to see you too. Until the next time, this has been episode 136 of the Business Development Podcast. We have been graced by the founder of North and West, Joel Magalnick. He is my value proposition expert. I appreciate him immensely. Until next time, you've been listening to the Business Development Podcast, and we will catch you on the flip side.
This has been the Business Development Podcast with Kelly Kennedy. Kelly has 15 years in sales and business development experience within the Alberta oil and gas industry and founded his own business development firm in 2020. His passion and his specialization is in customer relationship generation and business development. The show is brought to you by Capital Business Development, your business development specialists. For more, we invite you to the website at www.capitalbd.ca. See you next time on the Business Development Podcast.
Hey there, business rock stars. In today's fast-paced world, trust is everything, especially when it comes to your IT infrastructure. That's why I'm thrilled to introduce one of our amazing sponsors, Foresight for IT, your ultimate ally in the digital landscape. Based in Edmonton, with a network spanning all major Canadian cities and beyond, Foresight for IT is more than just an IT service provider. They're your trusted partner, dedicated to empowering your business. Their comprehensive approach to IT, covering everything from startup to support, security, and scalability, ensures your operations run smoothly 24/7. Imagine having a team of dedicated experts at your disposal, ready to tackle any IT challenge, while you focus on what you do best, growing your business. Whether you're in blue-collar industries, finance, law, or healthcare, Foresight for IT is the game-changing partner you've been looking for. So rock your business to new heights with Foresight for IT. Visit www.foresightforit.com and let them know Kelly sent you. That's FORESIGHTFORIT.com. Foresight for IT, refining the IT experience one partnership at a time.